Can you believe it? 600,000 tons of American corn were rejected. Not because of pests, not because of weather, but because international buyers from South Korea, Brazil, all the way to China quietly pulled back canceled contracts and turned to Canada. When markets disappear, farmers hit a dead end. And before they could even adapt, Big Beautiful Bill made things worse. Agricultural subsidies were cut, insurance vanished, and food assistance was gone. Don't think this is just some rural issue, because when corn doesn't sell, food prices skyrocket, and your wallet is the first thing to be squeezed. Join me as we explore 10 states silently collapsing because 600,000 tons of American corn were sent back. You'll see how the chaos begins in the fields but ends right in the kitchen of every American family, including yours. Number 1, South Dakota. South Dakota has never been this quiet. This season, roads that are usually bustling with harvest trucks now lie still. Wind sweeps through the empty grain yards. Corn silos are shut down, not because the harvest is over, but because 320,000 tons of corn have nowhere to go. No buyers, no takers, no one waiting. South Korea has long been a steady partner to the US, buying consistently, never putting pressure, never making things difficult. But this July, after criticism about spending too little on defense, Korean media began to question, where is this relationship heading? It started with the cancellation of a $2 billion Apache helicopter deal, but then they reconsidered agricultural contracts as well. And they began looking elsewhere. They turned to Canada, a gentle neighbor who, like them, once made many concessions to the US. Without loud protests, Canada chose a different path, launching the Buy Canadian campaign, restructuring domestic production, and steadily reclaiming international markets through persistence. No need to shout, just do the right thing. And so South Korea chose Canada as a long-term partner. Because if Canada can do it, why can't Korea? Brazil didn't stay out of the game either. After news broke that the US would impose higher tariffs on certain major exports, Brazil responded not with words, but with action. They slashed imports of US corn and shifted contracts to Argentina and Russia. But what's noteworthy is Brazil didn't stop at finding new sources. They joined forces with Canada to diversify supply chains and develop new trade routes. And come August, if you look at the global trade map, you might see a new power duo emerging, one that no longer includes the US. None of these changes were in the hands of South Dakotans, but the consequences hit them hard day by day. Ethanol plants cut hours. Trucks had no orders. Silos closed with no shipments scheduled. According to USDA data, corn exports from the state dropped over 60% in June alone. People began to ask, if we keep planting, who are we planting for? And just when their last hope was some kind of support policy, Big Beautiful Bill passed. With its goal to restructure the budget and increase state self-reliance, the bill simultaneously cut several familiar programs: crop insurance, rural health support, and farm credit. Those who once survived on small subsidies now had to reconsider everything. You and I were not policymakers. We don't negotiate treaties or set tariffs, but we understand the feeling when you've trusted the system, tried to follow a stable path, only to realize everything can change with a decision that wasn't yours. And if we were in their shoes, maybe we'd do the same. South Dakota didn't collapse overnight. It cracked little by little through canceled shipments, the quiet retreat of allies, and policy shifts that farmers were never consulted on. And if a once export stronghold like South Dakota can be left behind then, will Illinois, once known as the GMO corn capital of the world, be able to stand firm when the market starts saying no to that very crop? Number 2, Illinois. Do you remember the last time you paused at a food label just to read the line non-GMO or glyphosate free? Maybe you didn't think much of it, but maybe like many Americans, you've started to wonder, why is the world saying no to something we eat every day in Illinois? Corn is in every meal, whether you notice it or not. In bread, in beef, in kids' breakfast cereal. For years, we've eaten it without worry because it's made in America. And if it's American, it must be safe, we were taught that. But then, the world started saying no. Europe updated standards on pesticide residues. Glyphosate, widely used on Illinois cornfields, is now on the priority ban list. China didn't make a fuss, just quietly required triple-layer traceability. Illinois businesses couldn't keep up. Orders vanished, contracts disappeared, and the corn stayed behind. Growers were confused, but consumers were the ones who truly began to feel alarmed. Not just because of lost trust, but because they started looking back and saw something chilling. We've eaten this corn every day for decades. in our lunch sandwiches, in weekend barbecues, in the cereal you pour into your grandchild's bowl. If those residues weren't tightly controlled, if glyphosate and other chemicals are domestically allowed, but globally rejected, then have we lived through a whole era where illness took root quietly right in our kitchens? You may not want to believe it, but you've probably seen it. Cancer rates in America rising, affecting younger people. Food allergies surging. Endocrine disorders, hormone imbalances, chronic illnesses with no clear cause. Showing up more often, more evenly, like part of daily life. No one says GMO corn is the cause, but no one can say for sure it's blameless. And that's exactly why American consumers are beginning to hesitate at the shelves, starting to look for alternatives, and starting to question things they never used to. They see the label Canada non-GMO traceable from seed to shelf. They see items once reserved for health stores now on Walmart shelves, and they stop. Not necessarily to switch, but to ask, if the world turns away, should I stand still? Retailers don't need theories. They see sales data, they see domestic corn slowing, Canadian corn rising, so they cut Illinois orders, increase Canadian ones. American corn grown in Illinois can no longer be sold, not because it's bad, but because trust has cracked. Farmers began burning fields, not in protest, but because stored crops wouldn't sell. Storage fees spiked and export taxes increased. Some demolished entire silos, erasing old harvests just to feel a little less trapped. Then came a new season. Some said we need to switch seeds, adapt to the market. They wanted to change, but looked around and saw nothing left. No subsidies for clean seed, no traceability equipment. Big Beautiful Bill had cut all the support programs they once relied on. Change now isn't just a decision. It's an investment they're not sure they can still afford. Meanwhile, Canada is 5 years ahead. They have system supply chains ready buyers. Illinois is starting over with nothing. And even if farmers are ready to change seeds, learn new tech, they still have to ask, is it too late? Number 3, Texas. Texas is facing a kind of shortage unlike any crisis in recent memory. Not from lack of money, not from lack of will, but from a shortage of things we once thought always available: rice, corn, cereal, flour, canned vegetables. The things an ordinary American family once took for granted. It didn't start in Texas. It started in South Dakota, where hundreds of thousands of tons of corn were returned, burned because there were no buyers. It continued in Illinois, where American corn was rejected globally for failing to meet pesticide residue standards. And then, when containers stalled, trucks stopped, and warehouses had nowhere to send goods, Texas was left empty-handed in a season that should have been about harvesting, stocking up, and preparing for the hottest month of the year. Then came July. While the country was on holiday, Texas was hit by a sudden flood, not because rain was new, but because for the first time they weren't warned in time. If only the alert systems were still being updated. If only the flash flood sensors hadn't lost funding. If only NOAA weather forecasts weren't on their own due to staff cuts from the very bill many now call Big Beautiful Bill. Then maybe Texans could have managed like they've done so many times before, but not this time. The water came before the corn could be harvested. Warehouses flooded, stored goods turned moldy, damp, clumpy. Shipping routes shut down. And in 1 week, Texas lacked not just clean water, but faith that the system still had their back. No one here debated GMOs or traceability. Texans didn't have time for that. They just needed something to eat, something filling, something clean, and something to share with neighbors if needed. But this time, there was nothing to share. In Bastrop, the community library stayed open overnight so people could share dry goods. A store in Hill Country hung a sign, "We're sorry, delivery trucks haven't returned." A school on the outskirts of Austin cut lunch portions because the kitchen had nothing left. Texans didn't complain. They just started counting how many bags of rice they'd need, how many cans of beans, how much fuel to stock just in case next week doesn't get better. They were once a symbol of resilience, but today they too began to feel quietly left behind. Not because anyone hates them, just because the chain broke and no one warned them. You don't have to be a farmer to feel this. If you've ever walked into a grocery store, held a bag, and wondered why your usual food costs more than last week, then you're living what Texas is now feeling. Most clearly, scarcity has crossed the familiar line, and it's now touching the most basic things. If a state like Texas, known for self-reliance, is struggling, what will happen to places even more fragile? Number 4, California. Have you noticed over the past few weeks something has started to Quiet down at supermarkets in California. Some shelves are emptier than usual. Familiar corn products are dwindling, replaced by packages labeled organic imported from Canada, priced noticeably higher. Not everyone questions it, but many are starting to ask, where has the local corn gone? No one is outright saying there's a crisis. There are no headlines declaring a corn shortage. But if you pay attention, you'll notice subtle changes creeping into every corner of daily life, not loudly, but quietly, like water seeping into wood. California has never been a major corn-producing state, but it's a massive consumer. Corn is in everything from bread and snacks to fast food. For decades, we've grown used to a steady supply from the Midwest. But things began to shake when a string of countries, Europe, Japan, Brazil, stopped buying American corn. They said unclear origins, too many chemicals, substandard GMO practices. Then that shift started reversing back home. Californians, known for their sensitivity to health and clean food, left supermarkets with no choice but to respond. So they turned to alternative sources, Canada, Mexico places with stricter certifications. But clean food is scarce and the price isn't easy to stomach. Remember that box of cereal that cost around $4 at the beginning of the year? It's nearly $6 now. According to UCLA, organic food in the state has increased in price by 27% compared to last year. That might not sound like much, but if you live on a pension or social support, that amount is enough to make you think twice about each purchase. The issue here isn't just about money, it's about the feeling of being left behind. Those who can afford it still eat clean, ordering from safe sources. Those who can't are forced to choose industrial food, the very kind other countries are rejecting. Sounds paradoxical, doesn't it? But it's happening right in the heart of the state, once seen as a leader in smart consumption. Local farms could have helped fill the gap. But you know how it goes when the new budget law passed in June. Subsidies for farmers transitioning to greener models were also cut back. No loud announcement, just no more old support packages this year. Even healthy school lunch programs for kids were scaled back. That proud circle of clean eating, green living public health is being quietly pulled away point by point. And then people start getting used to it as if everything were still fine. But is it really fine? When trust in domestic food begins to waver, when you're no longer sure the meal on your plate is truly safe, then the shortage is no longer in warehouses. It's in the sense of security within your daily choices. And you know what that feeling is far more concerning. And today's story doesn't end there. You won't believe who shows up at number 5. Number 5, Nebraska. You may have never set foot in Nebraska, but if you've pumped E15 gas-eaten American beef, or bought a budget-friendly box of cereal, you've used products from this land. Corn here isn't for direct eating. It's turned into fuel livestock feed, the quiet backbone of the affordable food chain that once built the American consumer dream. Yet in July this year, while some places faced such shortages they had to import, Nebraska was overflowing with surplus. Corn sat piled in silos and storage warehouses going nowhere, not because people didn't want to sell, but because no one wanted to buy. Since China and Europe tightened chemical residue and traceability standards, countless corn export contracts have been canceled. The corn itself hasn't changed, but the world has. And as longtime trading partners shut their doors, ethanol plants couldn't run at full capacity either. According to Nebraska public media, hundreds of thousands of tons of corn are now labeled non-consumable inventory, a figure growing weekly. Locals say never have the buying stations been this quiet. No more rumbling truck engines, no more farmers lining up to deliver. The fields haven't lacked rain or seeds, but they lack purpose. Perhaps nothing's more heartbreaking than producing plenty, only for no one to want it. And when Big Beautiful Bill went into effect, cutting part of the storage and insurance funding, things got worse. Many farmers couldn't afford to preserve their crops, so they let the corn mold rot, then burned it themselves. That's not just material loss. That's the feeling of being pushed out of the game by a market they once trusted to be stable. Meanwhile, you living hundreds of miles from Nebraska are feeling the consequences in another way. E15 gas prices rose about 15 cents per gallon. Meat and dairy got pricier as feed costs spiked when corn couldn't move. A vicious cycle is tightening. There's excess product, but it can't reach the right places. Farmers can't sell, but consumers pay more. And the question is no longer can Nebraska pull through, but rather, if a state with modern large-scale production can be pushed out of the trade flow, what place can still stand firm? Number 6, Minnesota. In Minnesota, where harvest season used to be the liveliest time of year, Now only the wind blows across untouched cornfields. Not because farmers don't want to harvest, but because there's no one left to do it. This July, Minnesota wasn't just short on seasonal labor, it lost a key link that quietly kept its production engine running. For years, most of the state's harvest workers came from immigrant communities, those willing to take on hard, unglamorous, but absolutely essential jobs. But in recent months, changes in visa procedures, tighter border security, and stricter legal employment regulations have caused many to leave. Some returned home. Increasingly, others are heading for Canada, where agricultural job programs are said to be clearer and more sustainable. When there's no labor exports miss deadlines. A few major partners already wary about residue standards and traceability lost patience. They pulled contracts shifted to countries with more stable supply chains. Quietly, without complaint. They just left, taking with them the livelihoods that once sustained thousands here. Meanwhile, production costs continue to climb. Fertilizer prices, especially from Canada, have soared due to recent tax adjustments, putting Minnesota farmers in a bind, spending more earning less. Some chose to cut planting area. Others had to let corn die in the field, lacking both labor and funds to reinvest. And so the cycle begins. Unharvested corn leads to processing plants, lacking raw material, livestock farms running short on feed, and meat and dairy prices rising by the week. Consumers feel it not in news reports, but right on the grocery bill, familiar products creeping up in price shelves growing barer. Minnesota isn't the first place that comes to mind when we talk about supply chain crises, but this time it's that very quietness that makes the fall more dangerous. A state once considered the heart of the food production chain is now struggling to revive, while consumers across America, even those who've never set foot here, are paying the price for a misaligned system. And if that chain continues to snap, no need for sirens, just look at your dinner table and you'll see. Number 7, Ohio. A distribution warehouse on the outskirts of Columbus just closed last week, not because of supply shortages, but because no one is willing to pay to move goods anymore. Ohio hasn't long been a top corn-producing state, but it's been an almost irreplaceable link in the agricultural processing and distribution chain. From Midwest fields, corn is sent to Ohio to be pressed, fermented, mixed, then moved on to food factories or export ports. You may have never been to Ohio, but most of what you eat, from snacks and cold cuts to ketchup, has passed through here. But in recent months, that link has started to stall. Several new federal budget allocation adjustments intended to streamline underperforming operations have led to a halt in agricultural transport and temporary storage subsidies in many states, including Ohio. Small logistics firms can't keep routes running. Transportation costs are soaring. Warehouses are operating minimally or shutting down altogether. And the supply chain is warping in ways no one predicted. The issue is this: when logistics choke Ohio, rather than helping U.S. agriculture reach further, becomes the place where everything gets stuck. Big food companies like General Mills, Kraft, Heinz, and PepsiCo have quickly redirected, not because they hate American corn, but because they need something more stable, more punctual. Canada and Mexico became the new options. No official statements, but the import lists have shifted, and Ohio slowly is being pushed aside. For consumers, the impact isn't about statistics, it's about shrinking choices. Prices for grain-based products rise weekly. Familiar brands start disappearing from shelves. What's left is either more expensive or no longer from the sources you used to trust. Older adults, those who've trusted local agriculture all their lives, are starting to wonder if even the domestic supply chain can't function what still counts as food safety. Meanwhile, small co-ops in Ohio, once the bridge between farmers and the broader market, are beginning to wither. Orders drop, investment dries up. Meetings no longer discuss expansion or crop innovation, but how to keep the bank account afloat until next season. And you know what comes next when a transfer hub loses its position. The regions that depend on it, from Kentucky to Pennsylvania, also suffer a chain reaction. How many chances remain for those without warehouses, without networks? Let's move on to story number 8, where a single corn kernel can affect something you'd never expect. Number 8, Indiana. Did you know that the fast food meals we often enjoy with their fragrant fried chicken or burgers might contain a not-so-pleasant story from Indiana? A place where cornfields once stood as a source of pride is now the origin of a quiet crisis threatening the livestock industry, a sector considered the backbone of this state. Corn is not just a crop for making sweet cakes or food for humans. In Indiana, it's the main feed for chickens, pigs, and cattle, and also the raw material for producing high-fructose corn syrup, HFCS, a sweetener that has infiltrated almost every processed fast food product we commonly see. But as people began to grow wary of HFCS, what was once a convenient sweetness suddenly became something suspicious, even avoided. The result, corn syrup processing plants were forced to cut production or shut down entirely. This not only caused job losses, but directly affected livestock farms that relied on cheap, stable supplies of corn. Just imagine with rising corn costs, a small chicken farmer in Indiana now has to carefully calculate every cent spent on feed. No longer having the cushion they once did, many farms have had to downsize or even shut down. Fast food restaurants are not exempt either, as corn-based ingredients grow more expensive and harder to produce in bulk menus, are adjusted corn syrup-heavy items reduced or replaced with alternatives. These seemingly small changes ripple across an ecosystem most of us hardly notice. Perhaps the saddest part is that longtime consumers, those who once trusted and used HFCS-containing products, now feel betrayed. They're not just worried about health, but disappointed to realize that the food they eat every day is no longer the same, and the consequences of that fall upon the workers in their own hometowns. It's a vicious cycle that's hard to untangle. People want to eat healthier and steer clear of things like HFCS. But that very decision drives up feed costs, forcing farmers and workers to bear the burden, while consumers ultimately pay the price through food supply instability and rising prices. Indiana is no longer the fertile ground for livestock farming it once was. There, people are witnessing a profound shift, not just in how crops are grown and processed, but in how residents must adapt to an increasingly difficult reality. What seems like a small change, like shifting consumer taste, is forcing ordinary workers to face unprecedented challenges. And you know, stories like this don't just end in Indiana. Number 9, North Carolina. Do you remember the last time you held a piece of fried chicken and asked yourself, is this really American chicken? In North Carolina, that question is no longer uncommon. This state, known as one of the largest poultry farming centers in the country, is now facing an unprecedented crisis. Its main input, corn, has suddenly become something that's neither easily available nor affordable. Over 600,000 tons of U.S. corn have been rejected by export markets, sending domestic corn prices soaring. For chicken farms that rely entirely on corn feed, this is like having their lifeline cut off. Rising feed prices lead to rising product costs, while competitive pressure and stricter quality demands continue to mount. What seemed like just a farmer's problem quickly rippled into something affecting the most familiar parts of our lives: fast food. McDonald's, the world's largest fast food chain, after a recent food safety scandal, decided to stop working with many chicken suppliers in North Carolina. They turned to Canada instead, where food safety protocols are stricter. This came as a shock not only to farmers, but also to the local poultry industry. And the irony. Even as the poultry market falls into chaos, consumers continue to watch flashy fast food ads and queue up for satisfying chicken sandwiches, unaware that the American flavor they expect is fading, being replaced by ingredients chosen through a very different process. Small chicken farms, already disadvantaged against major food corporations, now face the grim prospect of mass closures due to high costs, inflexible pricing, and an increasingly demanding domestic market. North Carolina's story is a wake-up call for all of American agriculture when corn, such an essential input, is rejected abroad. The damage isn't just lost exports, it's the collapse of the entire domestic supply chain. This crisis isn't just about prices or supply. It raises a serious question about public trust in the domestic food production system. Those who once took pride in American fried chicken must now reconsider, is what they're eating still made in USA or just a shadow of it. Number 10, Nevada. You probably didn't expect the last name to be Nevada, a place famous for its bright casino lights and vibrant shows. People pour money here for lavish entertainment, yet often struggle to find fresh food items in supermarkets. This is the paradox many Nevada residents now face. Money still flows toward fleeting joys, while everyday meals grow more expensive and scarce. In 2025, food costs in Nevada skyrocketed not just due to general inflation, but because of agricultural supply chain shocks. China, Brazil, and several international markets rejected U.S. corn, leading to a sudden surplus of stockpiled corn domestically. But here's the paradox. Even with this paper, surplus livestock feed prices continued climbing, pushing poultry and cattle farms into hardship. Nevada, not known for large-scale corn cultivation or livestock farming, ended up bearing the brunt of these effects. From diners to supermarkets, rising food prices forced many families to think twice about every meal. Local food assistance programs were reduced or cut entirely, making clean, fresh food even rarer. The wealthy can still access organic options, but for most middle and low-income households, the choice now lies between expensive and not enough. You might think of Nevada as a land of lights and laughter, but behind the scenes, people are struggling to find enough food for their families. While millions of dollars are spent on casinos and concert tickets, basic grocery items vanish from shelves or cost several times more than they did just a few years ago. This isn't just a matter of price. It's a warning sign of a fracture in the U.S. food supply system. When inputs like corn, one of the most vital crops for livestock feed, are disrupted, every link in the chain suffers. Farms can't maintain output. Processing plants struggle, and consumers are left with fewer choices and higher costs. Nevada isn't the only place affected, but its story makes it clear a state with little agriculture still suffers deeply when a farming crisis spreads. Whether you live in a city or the countryside, whether you're a farmer or not, this crisis will reach you through your grocery bills and the tough decisions before every meal. In the end, when 600,000 tons of corn are rejected, it's not just a farmer's problem, it's a quiet transformation creeping into all our lives. Because if food itself gets turned away, the consequences won't stop at the fields. They'll reach every dinner table, every receipt, every daily choice. Are you noticing higher food prices? Do you still trust what you eat every day? And could this be just the beginning of a larger breakdown that we're not yet ready for? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. All analysis in this video is based on current data and independent perspectives, and is not intended to make absolute predictions or cause confusion.